Hello, this video is going to demonstrate how to build an Amazon AWS Lambda function using C# that works with Amazon Connect. Amazon Connect, of course, is Amazon's cloud phone system, and so there's some special challenges in consuming Lambda functions from Amazon Connect, and I'm going to be highlighting those in this video. And again, a key aspect of this video is that it uses C# as a development language for that Lambda function. So there's some good examples on the web of Lambda functions, obviously in C#, and there's a number of examples of Lambda functions in association with Amazon Connect, but there's not a lot of good examples that show Lambda functions developed in C# that are then used in conjunction with Amazon Connect. So there's a good article here that's highlighted here on the main screen. And it lists the steps involved in invoking a Lambda function from a contact flow. So, of course, a contact flow is the script that you develop for Amazon Connect to handle a call. And so at some point in that script, for a good example is a CRM lookup. A caller calls in. You want to use their phone number to look up their account in your CRM database. And so in order to do that, you could use a Lambda function. Basically, you put the CRM access logic in your Lambda function, and you make a request to that and get the results back. And so we're going to pretend that that's what we're doing here as we build this Lambda function today. I'm also going to be doing some deliberate mistakes so that I can highlight common errors that you will see. So the first step here that they list to create a Lambda function to be used by, and again, this article is not C# specific. It's a generic, typical Lambda functions are being developed in Node.js, and with JavaScript or Java or some of the other languages out there. But C# is now a totally valid language to develop them. So the first step is to create the Lambda function and define its trigger policy. So really the first step is actually two steps. So 1A is creating the function and 1B is creating the trigger policy. So we're gonna start by doing 1A by creating the function. So I've loaded up Visual Studio. This is 2017, and I'm going to be. I've also installed the AWS Toolkit for .NET, and you can see that over here in the left, in that I have the AWS Explorer. But the other thing it gives me is the ability to create an AWS Lambda function project. So that's what I'm going to be showing here today. I do a new project, and there's really two main types of Lambda function projects. There's a Lambda project. There's a Lambda function, which is the lightest weight, simplest in a way conceptually, and then there's the serverless applications. So we're today going to be just creating a Lambda function project. There's of course variants of those two, which relate to whether you have test support built into your project. We're not going to be using the test variant, so we're just going to be selecting the first one. For the project name, I'm going to be calling it Connect Lambda. And notice down here it says framework 4.6.1. That's not really relevant. The point here is that the project is going to, notice it says .NET Core up here. It's actually going to be a .NET Core project. All right. So now I'm going to select the empty function blueprint. It's not totally empty. It actually creates a very simple function. It gives you a starter to plug your code in. So we'll go ahead and do that. And now we have our Lambda function project. And it's really pretty simple. You've got a single CS file, C# file, where you've got your project namespace, Connect Lambda, because that's the name of my project. And then you've got a class called function. In there, you've got function handler. You don't want to modify this signature. I mean, you can, but there's no real reason to. And you notice that this function now takes two pieces of input. It takes a string in this case, and then something called the Lambda context. We're not going to be looking at Lambda context particularly, but it does have some useful information in there that you might need to use in certain situations. Input is going to be the main data that comes from Connect. Now, in point of fact, what comes from Connect is going to be a JSON structure. I'll show you that in a minute, but we're not too concerned with that. For now, we're just going to keep this function. All this function is doing, by the way, is it's taking a string as input and returning that string as an uppercase string. So it's about as simple as it gets. I'll go ahead and build this. And now the thing I'm going to do is publish it to AWS Lambda. So I've already published before, so I've already configured my credentials to access my AWS account. So when I say publish to Lambda, I get this dialog. That's actually one of two. There's going to be a second dialog that follows this. So the first thing I need to do is name my Lambda function, and I think it's good practice here to name it the same as your project. I want to make sure I spell that right. Everything else, notice here it's filled in. This is where you, if I did call the method by some other name, I could modify it here and so forth, or it would actually have picked that up. And notice that it's got this checkbox, Safe Settings, AWS Lambda Tools. This is the other important file over here, which is actually part of what gets uploaded to AWS, and it defines some of the basic rules about your Lambda function. I'll show you that in a second. So we're good here. Notice it's based on .NET Core 2.1. Oh, by the way, let me just jump back. Notice that the region, in fact, the region I've got selected is US East, North Virginia. And that's because that's where my call center, my Connect call center is located, is being served out of. Connect is not available in every region, so that's going to be limited. Lambda is available in every region, Lambda functions, but Connect call centers are not. So that's going to be limiting where you can put your Lambda function. So in this case, it matches where my call center is. The role name, now this is an important idea. This is where I'm giving my function the privileges that it needs to be able to access other resources within AWS. So if I do a drop down here, look at some of these roles down here. The one that I need actually is just this one, which is all I need is the ability to write for the CloudWatch logs. I don't need read access to Dynamo. I don't need S3. I don't need Kinesis. I don't need any of that stuff. I might, and if I did, then obviously I'd have to use a better role here or a different role. But in this case, I'm just going to use a new role based on basic execution role. And that's it. I can reduce the memory footprint down to 128 because I know I'm not going to be using more than that. And you pay by the meg, so it's in your interest to not subscribe to your memory. Or timeout, I'll leave it 30. I mean, in theory, this function should execute in 100 milliseconds or less. And then the other thing to note is down here in the lower right where it's got the variable and values, I can actually add environment variables. And so, you know, if this function were running on a Windows machine and it accessed the environment, it would see, you know, the normal environment that's available, you know, the stuff on your path and all that kind of stuff that's configured. But when you're running in a serverless framework, you essentially have an empty environment. So this is a way to populate your environment, and this is going to be quite useful for example, default values. If this Lambda function was intended to interface to a CRM, then it would make sense to pass in, for example, the static, you know, the URL for the the REST endpoint of the CRM and the user ID and password to that CRM in order to authenticate with it. So I'll go ahead. I'm ready to upload now. I'm not going to deal with any of that yet. So I'll go ahead and upload my function. And notice it's got this checkbox that says Open Lambda Function View. That's a useful tool that I'll show you here in a minute. The first time you upload, because I created this new role, this takes a little bit long. It takes about 20 seconds. But normally it's about a three-second process. Notice it zipped up all the files, including the dependencies, and that whole package went up to AWS. So now I can test it right here. This is that test tool that I mentioned. Notice this is function connect lambda up here. So I'll go ahead and invoke it, passing the data of test, and I should get back the word test in uppercase. So the function works. This actually executed up on the server. I can look at my logs here. They're not available yet. There it is. So if I look at download my log stream here, I can see, you know, start, and it ran. So let's start actually just by modifying the function a little bit to make sure that everything is good. So we're going to do the way you log in a Lambda function, and this goes into that log I just showed you, and more importantly goes into the CloudWatch log. So when you're running outside of an environment like this, Visual Studio, you can get to it. So in this case, I'm just going to do a console.writeLine of let me just function handler, just a note to show that I got control here, that I got called, and then So let's go ahead and upload. Now I don't need to rebuild. I might want to just to make sure that it builds cleanly, because it's a slower process if I upload to AWS and then it errors me because it can't build it. It will not let you upload code that doesn't compile. So let's go ahead and publish it. Upload. I don't need to go to the next step because I'm keeping the same settings as before. So it opens the tool again, back to test function. It's still got the same test data. I invoke it. I get my output, and now if I look at my logs, refresh, look at the most recent one, it's got that logging that I added, so I'm good. Let me add one other logging before I do anything else, which is let me do a console.write line of my input. By the way, I mentioned this JSON file. Let's take a quick look at that. This is where those settings that when I published it got put. So if I was using, there is a command line tool I could use, for example, to publish without doing it through Visual Studio. And in that case, this JSON file could be used by that. That's just information keeping. For example, if I leave this open and then publish, it'll say that it was modified on me. So it definitely is updating it every time you do a publish. Input. That's my problem. Build it. There. Anytime you don't build it, it's bound to have an error. All right, let's upload it. And go to the test function. That's better. Yeah, we expect it to take a little time the first time. Just got to load. Now let's jump over the logs. Refresh those logs. Okay, so there's our input data test. So now the next step, let's go back to our instructions here. Now the next step is really to define this trigger policy, but I'm going to skip that deliberately because I want you to see the error that I will get if I forget to do that step. So let's say we're chomping at the bit here. We created our Lambda function, and now the next thing we want to do is use the ARN of the Lambda function in an invoked Lambda function block of your contact flow. So what that's saying is we need to go to connect now, and we need to configure a call flow, and as part of that call flow, we need to invoke this Lambda function using the AWS Lambda function block. And the data that step is going to need is the ARN of our Lambda function. If we go to the Lambda management console, I've already got it loaded here, and I refresh, this is the function that we're creating in Visual Studio. So if I drill down on that, this is the ARN up here in the upper right. And I can click this little copy button, copied it to the clipboard. And so now what I want to do is I want to go to my call flow. And so this is the Amazon Connect dashboard for my, this is my instance called Grant Test. And so this is Grant Test. And I want to go and look at the call flows here, contact flows. And I've already got one set up called Connect Test Lambda Integration. And now this is actually based on one of their samples. They've got one of their samples called Sample Lambda Integration. What that does is it invokes a Lambda function to do an area code lookup to get back to state. And then it says you're from Massachusetts or you're from California or whatever. So you can look at that as an example of how to configure a call flow to execute a Lambda function. But I built one specifically for this example, so let's drill down on that and take a look at it. I'll go through it real quickly here. Table logging. We play a prompt that says, please hold while we do the lookup. We invoke, this is the key step here. We invoke the AWS Lambda function. And then if that function fails, we just say Lambda function failed and terminate. If it succeeds, then we check the result, possible result, and possibly play some information. But we're going to look at that in the future, so we don't need that. The main thing we need to do is configure that ARN, which we copied to the clipboard for this invoke step. So let me go here, get rid of the current value, and paste in mine. Notice it ends with connect lambda, which is the name of our function. So this is, in fact, the correct ARN to invoke that function we just built. Now the only thing we have to do is publish it, save it and publish it. So we'll click the down arrow over here and save and publish. Now this would be true whether you're developing a function C# or JavaScript or whatever. These are all steps that are configuration related. So now in Siri, I'm ready to test. I've got my Lambda function published. It's wired up to be called by this call flow. And of course, the last thing is I'd have to check my my inbound phone numbers, but I know in fact I've set up routing of a phone number to present to this call flow. So that's part of I'd go over here to phone numbers. I'd select one of my phone numbers that I've purchased or whatever, and I'd select as a call flow this particular contact flow, the connect test Lambda integration. Let's go ahead and call this, and I'll do it from speaker so we can hear the interaction.
Please hold while we execute test Lambda function. Lambda function failed.
Okay, so our function failed, we got hung up on. So let's take a look at our CloudWatch logs. We've got, this is our connect log. So I'll take a look at that. And I don't have anything in here because I deliberately cleared everything out before I started. But what we do have is I can see that, in other words, the first thing that happened is I did a set logging behavior. In other words, I enabled logging. Then I played my prompt, please hold while we execute test Lambda function. And then I tried to execute that Lambda function, and I got this error, access denied. Access denied is what you get if you forget your first step here, the B part of this step, which is define this trigger policy to allow Amazon to connect to invoke the function. So let's look down here in documentation where it describes what we need to do. Basically, we need to do this, which is create the Lambda. We need to configure the trigger policy. And the way we do that is the AWS add permission. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy. So what I'm going to do is if I bring up Notepad, paste this in, I need to fill in various information here. The information that I need is the name of the function. So right here where it says function name, it's got function : my Lambda function. I need to replace my Lambda function with connect Lambda. That's what I call my function. The other thing I need to do is change this ID, which is the account ID, to be my account ID. So let me grab my account ID. Okay, now I've replaced them. And the last thing I need is the ARN of my Connect instance. So what I need to do is I need to go to Amazon Connect in the AWS console, drill down on my call center, contact center, and here is that ARN. They don't give you a little copy button for some reason, so I have to do it old school here. See? Go back to my Notepad and replace that ARN with the correct one. So that's my Connect call center. That's my function, and that's my account. So let's grab this whole AWS command and paste it in over here in a command prompt, hit enter, and it should execute and update those permissions. All right, that permission is executed, and we got success. It didn't fail. So we're done with that step. So now let's go back and call into our call center again and see what we get in the log this time.
Please hold while we execute test Lambda function. Lambda function failed.
Okay, it still failed, but if we look at our CloudWatch log and our Connect call center, this time we get a different error. The first time we got access denied. This was our first test. But now we get Lambda function returned an error. Both of those took the error pass in the call flow. So up here, both of those took the error pass. So the only way to really tell the difference was to look at our logs. So we can see that the reason we failed the second time was different than the first time. The first time it was more straightforward. We never even got to the call flow. The second time we returned the error. Now the reason that we returned an error is because Connect's protocol is that what you return has to be a JSON structure. In other words, you can't return, if we look at our function in C#, our output is the incorrect type. Right now we're saying that we want a string as input and we're returning a string as output. What we need is our types that are acceptable to Connect. In other words, Connect expects JSON in and JSON out. And so the best types I've found, or the most straightforward and there's other options here, but is to return an object here and take as an input a dynamic. So I'll show you how we're going to use those two. One is that something I haven't discussed yet is if we look at the next step, which is and configure the Lambda function code to parse the JSON event sent from the contact flow. The structure that gets passed is, this is an example of it right here. There's important information in here. For example, this is a caller ID for an inbound call, the actual address, phone number of that party. The type of call itself, whether it's an inbound or an outbound call, it's going to be one of these 4 values, for example. And some other interesting information. Let's say that what we want is the phone number. Since we said that this whole structure is a dynamic, the way we're going to access that is as follows in our Lambda function. So after we log our input, we're going to say this phone number is that. Details, contact data, customer endpoint address. And we can see that here, details, contact data, customer endpoint address. So that's how we get to that string. And notice we're using this question mark, open bracket notation. That way, if for some reason we're incorrect, you know, if I've misspelled details, I won't get a crash. I'll get a null phone number ultimately. Which would be not shown as an empty string here. So we're now logging our output. Now on the return side, we can't return a string as an input because we're now returning an object. So as an example of what we could return, let me grab a snippet over here, is the following. Basically, we're creating a variable here that is basically mirrors a JSON structure of a contact equal and the name of a contact that we've set here. And the magic that allows all this to happen is here, this Lambda serializer. So this is it provides the smarts that converts on input the JSON into a dynamic structure and converts on output our object back into a JSON structure. All right, that's better. Build it. This time let's actually look at the results. Okay, and now let's publish it. All right, so it's published. Let's run our test function. Now we're not passing in valid JSON here, so we're going to get an empty phone number. But we don't care about that. Let's test it. There's another way we can test Lambda functions. You can go up to the console. AWS console and go to the Lambda section of that and then drill down on our function and we can do a test here. So I've got some test data. Let me grab a snippet to show you. Create so basically I've got a replication of that data that I showed you here, this data here. But I've only got the stuff that I care about. But really, I just have the address. Let's go ahead and save that. And now let's do a test. And let's take a look at the results. Okay, it worked when executed from here. So that means the function's working. I think the problem is that the test harness here is not happy. Oh, we need to put the same test data in here. Let's give that a try. All right, that's more like it. And here we get our same result. All right, so the function is executing local, from this test harness here, and it's also executing when we execute it from the Lambda management console. So we still have our connect call flow set up. We should still be executing it. So let's give a call in and see what we get.
Please hold while we execute test Lambda function. Hello, Mary Smith. Welcome back.
All right. So as you can see, we have success, and we went through some pain to get there. But once you've done this a couple of times, it's a pretty straightforward process, and you'll quickly get to the point where you can bang these things out. If we take a look at our log, let's see. If we look at the function logs, and the most recent one, we'll be able to see, for example, here we come in. Let's jump to the end. A couple other things to note here before we finish up. One is that if you look at the step in the contact flow, what happened here is we invoked our function, we got success back, and then we did a check contact attribute where we checked to see if we got back an attribute of contact, which we did. And the way we do that is we compare the external attribute named contact to the value unknown. And of course, it's paradoxical because if it equals unknown, then you didn't find your contact. But if you don't get a match on unknown, in other words, you got something back, it's sort of like saying if it's not null, then here we say hello and whatever the name of that contact is. The way we reference that is by this syntax within AWS, within the contact flow editor. Now, when we invoke the Lambda function, there's also this parameter capability. So this is a way to pass additional data. As we saw, we've got this structure of data that comes for free, but one of the fields in here is parameters. This guy, and so basically anything that we want to pass in here. This is an example where they did the sent attribute key parameter. If we want to have that passed, then we can do that here. So, for example, we could add a key value pair of, let's say, social security number. If for some reason we prompted the caller for their social security number, and we want to pass that to the Lambda function. Maybe it's going to verify that the contact has that as their internal member. So we'll say social security number. And let's say, I don't know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And we'll save. So now let's save and publish. Okay, now one other way of integrating with your passing data to your Lambda function that I mentioned earlier is the idea of the environment. So if we go back to our Lambda function, we can either set it by directly editing this JSON file. Notice the last setting is environment variables. But an easier way is just to publish. And then on the second page of your publish, down here is where you can set your environment variables. So let's go with the idea that we need to pass a CRM URL, and that would be, I don't know, HTTP colon HTTPS colon /www.google.com, and I'm going to add CRM user, and that's username, and then we're going to add CRM password, and that's going to be user password. Obviously, these would be the real values for your CRM. So this would be something Salesforce.com or Microsoft Dynamics or whatever. So let's go ahead and upload. And so now we've passed 2 additional sets of data to our function. We're passing environment variables, which are going to be the same no matter how many times that function is executed. And we're also then passing data that came from the call flow itself. So that we saw over here, where we're passing this social security number. So we're expecting now to see a social security number and also be able to get to the environment. To get to the environment, we actually have to do that from a script standpoint. By actually using the appropriate .NET request. So we could do something like string CRM URL is equal to environment dot get environment variable CRM URL. And we could do the same things for CRM user and password And then let's log all those. URL. Good to throw the password in your logs. Obviously, this is not best practice here for security. We're doing that, and as long as we're here, let's see if we can get at that that other that social security number. So that's we're going to do something similar to, and I've got a code snippet here. So now I'm grabbing, just like I get that phone number, I'm grabbing the, so I get the phone number out of the input data, and I'm going to want to get the social security number also out of my input data. And that is a little closer. Notice it's details parameter, and that matches with this example. Details, and then the next level down is parameters, and then whatever the name of the attribute key, value key. So in my case, it's details, parameters, and then social security number. That's what I call it. So hopefully this will all work. Let's build it, make sure it's clean. All right, and now let's publish it, upload. And let's just make sure the test's good here. Good. And now let's test it now with an actual phone call, and then take a look at that log. Let's go ahead and do that.
Please hold while we execute test Lambda function. Hello, Mary Smith. Welcome back.
Okay, so let's take a look at our CloudWatch log. And we want to go to our Lambda function, recent log. Here it is. Okay, here we got the environment information. There's our URL, username and password, and there's our social security number. So we did get, and there's our phone number. So we got all three pieces. So that concludes this video. I hope this all makes sense. Feel free to leave any questions in the comment section below. I'm planning to do some more videos where I'm going to do some real world stuff with these Lambda functions, specifically interfacing to various CRMs. So the next step is being able to interrogate a live CRM using customer phone numbers, for example.